The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Arcane Wonders, Game Toppers, appropriately timed episodes, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Spook City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Horrified from Ravensburger. Then they'll take a look back at their review of Coimbra in their Dukes Double Take. And now, the Spooks of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And also Alex.
Boy, you really, that was good. That was very good.
Was good? Is that the right descriptor?
No, it was good. It was good. You almost lost it there because I was trying very hard not to laugh, and I think you could see that as you were doing it. This is episode 211, which we're calling Universal Acclaim. That title thanks to listener Don Gilstrap, who suggested it over in our Board Game Geek Guild. We're talking about Horrified, which has all the Universal movie monsters. And then Acclaim is, what was it? Because you get Acclaim or something similar to Acclaim in Coimbra?
Yeah, it's that, and also it was a pretty well-received game. I think it was a BGG Golden Geek nominee. There's a couple things that fit there, but yeah. And I think, I could be dead wrong on this, but it's the first time I recall seeing Don make a suggestion on the Board Game Geek Guild, and that's pretty cool to see. So good job, Don.
Well, way to go, Don. Yeah, and we get all of our help naming our episodes from our Board Game Geek Guild, Guild number 2008, and we've got a bunch of runners-up to share with you, but we will do that at the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that, Alex, and listeners.
I mean, I will stay tuned for it, but primarily because I'm contractually obligated to do so.
You aren't. You could walk at any time. There is no contract in place.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
you've been telling me for years there was some sort of contract that I was bound to, that I drunkenly signed something, and oh man, this changes everything.
As a lawyer, Alex, I would know that if you had drunkenly signed something that it wouldn't hold up in court. So
okay. Well, as someone who's not a lawyer, I wouldn't know that.
Oh, well, see, I'm teaching you stuff left and right. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Do you want to start off with our now every episode segment, the Dukes of Diet?
Yeah, let's do that real quick. So if you'll recall, last episode I had hit a slump or a plateau, but I'm doing good. I'm down another 4 pounds for a total of 45. I'm at 270, Alex, which is the lightest I've been in about 3.5 years. Which is pretty interesting. So yeah, doing good. Went to the gym today. I've been doing, I'm getting old, Alex. I'm getting old. So I was told by a medical professional a couple months ago, hey, when you go back to the gym, make sure you're not doing heavy weights. And I've always done heavy weights. I used to be a competitive powerlifter. And then for football and wrestling, always used to do, low reps, high weight. And so I've been good. And I've been doing higher reps, lower weights. And the last week and a half, I got really frustrated with it because I don't want to be a little weak guy. You know what I mean? I want to be a big, tough guy, Alex. So I started doing heavier weights again. And boy, is my body hurting. Yeah. So I did, I squatted 315 today. This morning or this afternoon, which is not super heavy, but that's the most I've lifted in probably 15 years or so. I should probably stop there. I should probably go no heavier than that, even as I get stronger. But it's going good. So yeah, down 45 pounds total. So how about you? How you doing?
I have no idea how many pounds I'm down because a Whole30 tenet is that you are supposed to put the scale away and not look at it during the 30 days. So I don't have any data points as far as weigh-ins. I am not obsessively thinking over cheese like I was 2 weeks ago, so I think that's a good sign of settling into things a little bit more. As Abby and I have talked about, we're sort of at the point of this where
It's more about it's just kind of counting the days until you unrestrict things. And it's just an element of boring that's kind of slipped into it. But her parents were in town and I cooked them a fish stew recipe that was pretty good. And I will say this in terms of feeling good, I felt good enough that I was able to say one of the stupidest sentences I've ever said in my whole life, which was,
Okay.
"Hey Abby, I'm feeling hunky. Come look at me." So yeah, among the dumbest things I've ever said, but it came from an honest place, Sean, of feeling hunky. Yeah,
absolutely.
So
you are looking rather hunky, Alex.
Thank you.
I have to say.
Appreciate that. CrossFit's going well. That's been consistent, and yeah. What? Oh yeah, you're looking good too.
Oh, thank you, Alex.
I don't know if hunky's the right word. I think handsome is the better fit.
I'm classic hunk, Alex.
You're classic hunk.
Some
Cool.
might say classic hunk, also known as chunk.
Oh, good. Well,
Oh, wait, that doesn't work.
That's as good a line to sign off of as any for the Dukes of Diet, a podcast within a podcast, now performed bi-weekly.
Yeah,
So-
we're a Russian nesting doll podcast.
Yes. Well, Sean, we should talk about games at some point here. What have you been playing?
I don't know, Alex. What have you been playing? I usually lead us off. Let's have you lead us off for a change.
All right. So I will say this, because I was a responsible adult and got enough plays in of Horrified. I have not played as many new things. I'm setting something up for later. Sean's face is
What?
yeah. What? So I did get some fresh plays fairly recently though of Football Highlights 2052. And this happened at, weirdly enough, Grey Fox Games game night. I went back and said hi to some old friends back there and got in not just one, but two plays back-to-back. And I talked about this a couple of episodes ago and said, I don't know about the depth here. There's just a lot of information you're juggling. And I got to say, the more I'm playing this, the more and more I'm digging it. For folks who don't know, this is the second in the series after Baseball Highlights 2045 first mentioned. I did it organically this time, Sean. I didn't even have to cheat this time to get it.
You dirty cheater. That's okay.
Not this time. Not this time. You are playing basically a game of football. It's a modified game of football. It's not the typical you have 4 downs to get 10 yards. It's you have 4 downs to get a touchdown on 2 separate fields. Cards you play have both defensive and offensive plays. You're playing a card typically for both sides. What I found I'm really gravitating towards is the tactical potential that things like audibles can really get you in this. They provide a really interesting decision point because you only have 3 of them per half, and you can, if you use them at the right time, it's a free touchdown or a complete game changer of a play. But if you use them too quickly, you set yourself up into a position where you don't have the right defense late, you could be really hosed. And it's something that I found more interesting the more I've played with it. And I will say, doing a draft at the start of the game instead of using just the starter teams gives you a better sense of what's going on in the game. And I've enjoyed playing it a lot more, and it's slowly but surely grown on me. So it's creeping up a little bit, and I'll need to play it a few more times ahead of a review. We will obviously be reviewing this at some point. I don't know how soon because we need to get Sean a copy in some form or fashion. But yeah, it's certainly growing on me, and I didn't think it would have that potential just because I've played so many iterations of this, but I've been pleasantly surprised by Football Highlights 2052, and for folks who are waiting on it, get a little more excited. Get a little more excited because there's more than meets the eye with this one after a first play. So
I think it sounds like our buddy Mike Fitzgerald got to you. he heard a certain lukewarmness, and he kind of put the screws to you. And you've succumbed to the pressure, being someone who does that so easily.
Now, let me tell you, it certainly didn't happen with Dragon Island. So, no, it didn't happen. So, yeah, that's Football Highlights 2052. It's going up in my mind. What about you, Sean? What have you been playing?
Alex, unlike you, I have gotten in a ton of plays of stuff, like a ton of stuff. Couple things that I'll talk about in detail. Just want to mention a couple different things, though. So this last weekend, we had a federal holiday here in the U.S., so I was off Monday, although Chewy had school, which when that happens, it's a magic time because I go drop Chewie off at school, and then Raquel and I play board games all day.
Amazing.
Which is pretty cool. We had a cold barbecue we went to later that night, but all morning, all afternoon until we had to pick up Chewie, we played a bunch of board games. We played Rialto, which is a classic Feld. We played, I taught her Glory to Rome. I finally played my copy of Glory to Rome. I've played Glory to Rome about 6 times in the last 2 weeks. We've been playing Eugene's copy at Empire. And I decided, you know what, I should sleeve up my copy. And I did that, printed up some deck holders for him. So I taught her Glory to Rome. She really enjoyed it. And then we also played the Quacks of Quedlinburg expansion, the Herb Witches. Say Herb or Herb? Herb is the person's name.
I say Herb.
Yeah, Herb, right. So the Herb Witches expansion. So this is released here in the US by North Star Games. And Quacks of Quedlinburg is a game that both you and I are pretty high on. We reviewed it probably coming up on a year ago now. This was the Kennerspiel des Jahres winner last year, designed by Wolfgang Warsch. And it is a fantastic press your luck game where you are building this potion. You've got your mixing cauldron, and you're pulling these tokens out of your bag, and you're basically trying to go along the spiral track. The farther along you get, the more points you get, the more purchase power you have to buy new ingredients. But there's this push your luck mechanic because there are these bad ingredients, and if you get too many of them, you'll blow up. So here's what the expansion adds. It adds new alternatives for the base game ingredients, because it already comes with, I think, like 4 different ways to play each ingredient, so that there's tons of variability here. So now you have 2 more ways to play the base ingredients. In addition, it has a brand new ingredient that, again, gives you different options for how you play. And then there are these 3 sets of witches, which you can use their abilities once per game to get you an advantage. And if you don't use their particular ability, you're going to get some bonus points, but usually it's worthwhile to use them. So, like, for example, one of them lets you ignore the effects of an explosion once per game. So nice little safety valve there. So all in all, the expansion is fine. It's not bad. Certainly it adds some more variability. I don't think it would necessarily be essential, but for the most important part that I haven't mentioned yet, Alex, it adds a 5th player. And
okay.
This is a game where, for the most part, people can kind of play simultaneously. You don't need to take turns, and because of that, I think adding a 5th player is fine. I think this game plays great at 4, plays great at 3, plays great at 2. I haven't played it at 5 yet, but I suspect it would be good at 5, and so I think that's pretty important. Last night at the Dukes of Dice game night, we actually brought this out without the expansion because we didn't have the expansion at the shop. Well, kind of did, but long story. It's not available to play. And we played with a newer gamer, but would have been nice if we had room for a 5th player in it. So I think it's worthwhile picking up. If you enjoy Quacks and you think you'll have a need for the 5th player, I would say definitely pick it up. I think it's fine having all the other stuff there. But yeah, it was good. I think it's decent. It's a decent expansion, and the 5th player really puts it over the top. So yeah, that's Quacks of Quedlinburg, the Herb Witches.
Very cool. I just got into play last night of a little game called Fantastic Factories. It's published by Deepwater Games and Meta Factory Games. Joseph Z. Chen and Justin Faulkner, the designers, and Joseph Z. Chen, also the artist on the game. And I wasn't sure what to think of this when I looked at it. It has a kind of quirky, colorful, infographic-y kind of style to it. But this is a game where you are trying to build the most efficient factory/tableau at the end of the game. How it's going to work is each turn you're going to have 2 phases. You're going to have phase 1, which is taken in turn order, where you're going to either pick a new factory card to add to your hand from one of the four available, or you're going to discard a factory card that you already have in hand to use the advantage of a specialist. And these specialists could be things like giving you extra dice for the next phase, or they could be flipping up the top card of the blueprint deck and getting more resources, or they could be the high roller where you roll a die until you either stop or bust. And then you go into the second phase. The second phase, you're going to roll 4 dice or possibly more if you've gotten specialists or have other effects, and you're going to roll those dice and then place them in your little building, which will either give you, at the top of it, it'll give you more cards. In the middle, it will give you electricity. In the bottom, it will give you metal. Electricity and metal, the 2 resources you need to build cards, as well as other cards. You're all going to do this simultaneously. There's no turn order to worry about. You're going to, if you want to build a card, you can do it at any time. You can build as many as you want. The only trick is every card you build can only be used once per turn. So, for instance, there's a card that I had that every time you build a building, gain 2 energy, but this only activates once per turn. Or, hey, put a pair of identical dice in this one to produce a good, which is a victory point, and some other stuff. Or, hey, trade in 2 cards and 2 zaps to get 2 victory points. It's a neat little engine builder because you're trying to kind of find some synergies and find something that right combination that's going to have everything click together. You can build monuments, which are just pure victory points. Some of the buildings themselves are also worth victory points. Other thing to mention, there are other little bonuses. So if I roll, say, and I play 3 4s in the same area, I'll generate more resources or I'll generate more cards if I play matching dice. And I really like this one, Sean. It doesn't take a heck of a long time to play. It's more like 45 minutes to an hour. But the synergies in here and the interesting decisions that come up, the hand management, it all works really well. And that card specialist system where you can burn a card from your hand to get this cool one-time ability of a specialist is really nice. There were moments of chance. There were moments of... there were certainly different paths to victory. Well, the player to my right was taking very much a build a whole crazy chain of combo, get a bunch of extra dice, and then ultimately turn that into monuments for points. I had sort of a steady as it goes, primarily energy-heavy strategy where I was generating energy and then turning that energy in for victory points. And it all just came together in a really satisfying package. I really dug Fantastic Factories, and I had not heard anything about it prior to jumping in, but it does have a watch it played video from Rodney, and it's a decent little game, Sean. I got to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised. So that one sound intriguing to you at all?
Yeah, I actually watched Tom Vassel's review of it a couple nights ago, and yeah, looks pretty interesting. I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's hefty, but it has some satisfying combos and satisfying things you can do in the game and different routes to victory. Yeah, played really well. So that's Fantastic Factories. I'd actually give that one a pretty decent recommendation.
Cool. So, Alex, do you think listeners would be interested if I described an additional 18xx game?
I mean, I wouldn't be interested.
I know you wouldn't be. And frankly, I don't know that there's a whole lot of our listeners would be super interested. So I talked about having a bunch of plays of various things. I'll mention 2 things briefly, both played with our buddy Matt Walker, who actually just had a birthday last night. So happy belated birthday. Oh, and Chris Holm had a birthday a week ago. Happy birthday, Chris. And then today, while we're recording, it's Steve O'Rourke's birthday, the name father. So happy birthday, Steve.
Keep on naming stuff, Steve.
I know.
Just not this episode. You done messed up.
So last Sunday, we played 4-player 18 mechs, which was really good. I won't go into too much detail. 18xx are these really long train games where there's stocks, stock manipulation, route building. It was really mean. It was a really mean game, but it was really good. It was my first win of an 18xx, so I was pretty happy with that. And then last night for Matt's birthday, his favorite game is Power Grid, and he has the Stock Companies expansion, which kind of turns it into a very light 18xx game, which I also won because I'm on a roll here, Alex. I am on a roll. Yeah, it's Power Grid, but no one has a color. You're floating these companies, and everyone's investing, and it was pretty interesting. I did. Poor Nick. I intentionally ran one of my 2 companies into the ground. And because I had priority deal in the next stock phase, I dumped all my stock, which meant that the presidency went to Matt, and Matt was next in turn order. and Matt dumped his stock, and Nick was left holding the bag, and it was quite unfortunate. But anyway, that was fun. Those are some fun times being mean and cutthroat. I enjoyed it. Totally game styles that you would enjoy too, Alex.
Sometimes. Less so.
Cutthroatness.
Not usually.
Cutthroatedosity. No. But okay, here's what I will talk about. Have you heard of Parks?
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
I've seen it. I haven't played it, but I've seen it.
Not Parks. I mispronounced Parks.
Oh.
Because it's all caps.
Got
the title, if you go to BGG, everywhere else, it's in all caps for some reason. So this is from Keymaster Games, designed by Henry Audubon. It's a recent Kickstarter fulfillment. And you are traveling through, touring various parks, national parks, I guess, trying to collect points. It's basically set collection of different resources, although it's not really resources. It's water, mountains, sun, and forest. And you're going to collect these things to then turn in to get these park cards, which are worth points. Throughout the game, there's also opportunities to snap pictures, and pictures are worth a point each. There are opportunities to get gear, which can make certain things cheaper. But it's interesting. It is in the family of a Tokaido or a Glenmore, sort of. Those are a little different, but where you have these player pieces and there's a track, and it's less Glenmore, more Tokaido. Actually, hold on. Maybe that's not right. Not important. I'll just
Can you move as far ahead on your turn as you'd like?
You can. Yes, you absolutely can.
Well, that's where the Tokaido comes in, maybe.
Well, it is, but I think does Tokaido happen in turn order, or is it the person farthest back? I can't remember.
Person farthest back.
Okay.
If I'm remembering correctly.
Right. So that element of Tokaido is not there. Because everyone progresses in turn order, but you can move ahead as far as you want. You can't move on to a space occupied by another player. You have to go past them, although there are some ways you can kind of mitigate that every now and then. But here's where this gets really interesting, is instead of having one player piece, you actually have 2 player pieces that you're controlling. So that adds a little bit of a difference there. And this is a very fine. It's a ducal fine.
Oh boy.
It's a family weight game. And
okay.
I think it's good. Good components. The art style is really good. And it was good. It was fine. I enjoyed it. And I think that if you are playing family weight games a lot, I think this is definitely worth checking out. I did a very abusive camera strategy. Where
strategy?
Yeah.
Wait, abusive camera strategy does not sound good at all.
So you're right. That doesn't sound good. So there's one particular spot on the track where if you go there, you spend 2 resources to take a picture. I think it's called the Vista, and you get a point. Okay, cool. I got other gear, which let me also turn certain types of spots on the trail into vistas of their own. And then when you do the Vista action, the main Vista action, you get the camera token, which makes it 1 resource instead of 2 resources. So for like 75% of my 5 to 6 camera actions per season, because it's 4 seasons, I did it at a discount. So I had like close to 20 points in pictures. And my final score was like 32 or something. So while everyone was collecting parks and having a couple pictures here and there, I had just a ton of pictures and then a healthy amount of parks. So it was good. It was fine. I'm not jonesing to play this again. Twist my arm, I might play it again, but it was good. It's a better game than crusty wargamer 18xx heavy gamer Sean should give it credit, or can give it credit for. But it's good.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's good. Yeah.
It looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it looks really good. And I think it's a great game in the cafe setting. Newer gamers that they've just tried Splendor, they've just tried Azul. Hey, why don't you try this out? I feel like Tokaido is probably a little bit easier to teach. And Tokaido is something where it's probably a pretty similar weight, but I definitely enjoy Tokaido a lot more.
Okay.
I think Tokaido's the better game.
Gotcha.
So,
Cool.
but that is Parks.
Awesome. And that's what we played lately. Let's head on over to the news desk. First up in news, yet another flavor of Codenames, not Codenames Disney. It's Codenames The Simpsons. Well, you have it is The Simpson in the show notes, but I'm assuming it's The Simpsons.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
You remember The Simpsons?
I do remember The Simpsons.
Well, they're back, but in Codenames form.
Whoa.
Do you know what reference that is? It's a Simpsons reference.
Is it?
Yeah. Millhouse. Because you don't go back to The Simpsons way back, right?
I haven't seen, I've seen some Simpsons. So, for instance, the one quote that immediately comes to mind is, I'm so hungry, I could eat at Arby's. Which is true, because that would be about the only situation, if I were starving, that I would want to eat at Arby's. Not a big fan of Arby's. Anyway.
I'm just thinking, I was referencing the third or fourth season episode where Millhouse goes, remember Alf? Well, he's back, but in Pog form. Remember Pogs, Alex? Or were you too young for Pogs?
I had some Pogs.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. So this is supposed to come out some point at the end of 2019. And have you heard of the publisher, the OP?
The OP, as in the overpowered?
Apparently that's the new name that USAopoly is going by. They've rebranded
by the way,
themselves.
I think that's the OP, if I had to guess. As in USAopoly, the OP?
Yeah, I guess it is.
Makes more sense to me that way.
It's a weird rebranding, but it's fine. Like, they're like, hey, USAopoly, that's not hip anymore. Now we're the OP.
It's just too long. You need a 2-syllable publisher name, or else you're not going to go anywhere in this world.
I guess. Who knows? So yeah, this is actually something I'm kind of interested in. I haven't been interested in Codenames Marvel or Codenames Disney. But for some reason, Alex, there's this part of me that loves The Simpsons, but hates what The Simpsons has become. Like I probably stopped watching The Simpsons on a regular basis like 10 years ago. I tried watching the new season a year or two ago, and it just was not great. There's this whole article, I can't remember where did I read it on, but it was, I mean, there are plenty of people that established their own golden age for the Simpsons, like, seasons 2 through 9, and then it was terrible. But I have gone back and watched clips and watched some episodes from that golden age, and it was super good. And I was a big Simpsons fan growing up and into young adulthood, but recent episodes, not so much. But for whatever reason, I am intrigued by Codenames The Simpsons. I don't know, Alex. Is there a Codenames that you would want? A Codenames with an IP that you would want? That you would be like, I'm totally going to get that.
Codenames NHL. Is that an IP? Does that work?
No, is it? I don't know.
That would be an interesting. I don't think that would be a very well selling one. I don't think that's coming anytime soon. I honestly don't think so. Codenames Arrested Development, maybe. That would be a fun one. I don't know. IPs don't. If I'm looking at my shelf of games, I'm looking at my shelf of all my games. I don't know if I have a single one that has an IP, like a true IP associated with it. Other than I have NHL Icebreaker, so I guess that's an NHL IP. Okay. Not that I can see. Yeah, I think literally no game that I own has an IP associated with it. So it's not a thing that really I care a ton about.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's Codenames The Simpsons. Hey, Alex,
yes.
Remember Gloomhaven?
I remember Gloom. I still haven't played it. Have you been playing it lately?
Well,
you were obsessed for a while with it.
Okay, you're totally on my joke. Well, it's back.
Sorry, you're doing this again. Got it.
Doing that again. It's called a callback, Alex.
It's back, but in board game form. Oh wait,
it's Arrested Development does. All right, we're just stepping all over Sean's jokes. That's fine. They're not that good anyway. Yeah. So Alex Childress announced a new Gloomhaven. It's called Gloomhaven:
Did you just say
Subtitle.
Alex Childress?
Isaac.
You definitely said Alex. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, great. Anyway, it's called Gloomhaven: Subtitle because he hasn't figured out the actual subtitle. Like that's what it actually shows on the box art of the game, it's just Gloomhaven Subtitle.
Huh. All right.
Because apparently that's how you market.
Hey, you get to that later.
So
it's not so important. What's in a name anyway?
That's this is going to be a standalone prequel game that has 24 new scenarios, 4 new characters, which you can use in Big Gloomhaven. And it's supposed to come out sometime in Q3 of next year of 2020. And I guess the idea here is, it's going to be $40-50 MSRP. So the idea here is that he's trying to remove all of the barriers to entry of this big giant box so that it's more accessible, I guess. And I think it's kind of crazy. And here's a little bit of my armchair quarterbacking.
Yeah.
Gloomhaven, the big box, is like 100 and some bucks, 110, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You could have cut the content of that box in half.
Yeah.
And sold it for the same price. And I feel like no one would have batted an eye.
Is there that much in there? I know it's very heavy.
Yes, there is a ton of stuff in there. And you could have then just released like a couple expansions over time. And I mean, but whatever. It's just like, is it the number 1 game still? Is it still number 1 or number 2?
Probably still is number 1. I can't imagine what would have topped it. Hang on.
So that's just me saying, hey, Gloomhaven could have been, a much different thing.
I feel like as a content creator, I have some sort of duty to play that game at some point, and yet I haven't. Yeah, it's still number 1.
Yeah, I think you'd like it. I don't know. I feel like this might be the way for you to get in. Or for you to play.
Okay, through the prequel.
Right. Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. So it's going to be sold at Target. I'm not sure if it's exclusively Target. I'm beginning to think it is, which is pretty interesting. Definitely different than the big box Gloomhaven. The small box is going to be in a big box store, Alex.
That is an interesting combo. It's also interesting just from the standpoint of from the Target exclusives that you've seen, I don't recall seeing one that was a decent sized strategy game. The closest would be something like, say, Villainous, which actually has some decent strategy to it, but I don't know if I'd call it heavy, for instance. And Gloomhaven, at least by reputation, is more of a heftier game. So, yeah. I mean, maybe that's Target trying to broaden its audience for board games, because you go in there and they certainly have a wide variety of board games. But it's an interesting placement for that one.
I'm curious if they were like, hey, what's the number 1 board game for hobbyists? Yeah. Let's go check this board game geek out. Oh, it's Gloomhaven. Let's snag that. I don't know.
Are we going to see a Twilight Struggle Target edition at some point then?
Well, that's what I was going to say. They certainly didn't do that with Twilight Struggle, but it hasn't been number 1 for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. I don't know. I might look into this. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is the one to jump in and review. Though we have a long time, Q3 2020, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, all right. Well, that's Gloomhaven Subtitle. Next up, a Kickstarter, a game called Rome and Roll, a roll and write Euro game where you're building Rome, you're raising legions, and it's a strategic 60 to 90 minute roll and write game. And it had some pretty decent quotes on there from what I saw, including one from Shut Up and Sit Down, and I don't see them talking a ton about stuff early. Rado also liked it. Sean, you looked pretty extensively at this page. What's going on in this game?
Yeah, so it's designed by David Turksey and Nick Shaw. David Turksey designed Anachrony, and this it kind of looks like a heftier roll and write, which is, I think, what interested me. There's some drafting of custom dice. Usually you kind of have a shared dice pool and it's not super extensive in roll and writes. And so there's a little extra meat on the bones there. You're drafting these dice to collect resources. You're building towns. I think there's like a shared area where you're constructing your polyomino pieces on. It looked really interesting, and it almost made me back it. I came very close to backing it, which would have been the first Kickstarter I've backed in a decent amount of time, because I'm not backing a ton of Kickstarters right now. So the game itself, the base pledge, is £29. in terms of price. So that's like $35, $36 US.
I'm going to get an exact translation currency conversion as of today. Hang on.
Okay.
21 pounds to dollars.
So yeah, it's like $35, $36. So that's all right.
It is $37.31.
All right, $37. There you go. And so I was like, okay, that's not too bad. And then I saw what shipping to the US would be, and it's $12.50 in pounds, which is
wait, I'm almost there. $16.08.
Ooh. So that's what, 53? No, $56? 50? I can
53. It's $53.
$53.
You had it right the first time. Yep.
Yeah. Math is hard. So yeah, I don't know if it's a it looks good. It looks interesting. I really enjoy roll and writes. I wouldn't mind this idea of kind of a lengthier, meatier roll and write, which it sounds like this is. I don't know. Did you take a look at it, Alex?
I did take a look at it, and the custom dice look really interesting. Production looks like it's going to be high quality. It has miniatures in there for some reason. I don't know how those actually come into play, or if those are more purely decorative, or what that really looks like. But no, it looks interesting, and I like twists on roll and writes. I just, for instance, played Welcome To with Abby for the first time the other day, and a couple of other friends, and that went over really well.
Yeah,
so I think that's a kind of genre that fits her very nicely.
Yeah, I have I can't remember what it's called. It's the role player roll and write, or one of the two roll and writes, I think. Just picked that up the other day, and hopefully might be able to play that tonight, actually. But anyway, this ends November 4th. So far, they've raised about $47,000 US, so it's funded, and it's supposed to fulfill sometime in May 2020. I think it's definitely worth checking out. The shipping made me a little hesitant. Maybe if you're overseas and the shipping's not so bad, maybe that's something you might want to look into. But I guess, Alex, I'll just have to save my money for more GMT P500 games.
Bully for this show. Fantastic news.
Yeah.
Couldn't be better. I mean, it could be better. You could spend on, stuff we might actually talk about on this podcast.
Hey, let's not put ourselves in a corner, Alex, okay?
That's fair.
There's a wide breadth of games out there.
The GMT of Dice. A podcast about GMT, and GMT.
Don't tempt me, Alex.
I will say this. It's not super unusual, if only because you will certainly find YouTube channels dedicated to companies. Some within the hobby and some that are cruise lines. So I'm going on a cruise in about a month, and I've been doing some research. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Hey, that's Roman Roll, and that is a look at the news. Where in the world is Berkey San Diego?
Well, Alex,
Berkey San Diego.
Berkey is not in San Diego. He's going to be in Essen for the Spiel at Essen 2019. They're going to be in Hall 6, Game Toppers that is. Hall 6, booth 6, D as in Delta 102, right next to Games Workshop. Fine makers of Blood Bowl and a bunch of other games that I used to play a billion years ago.
Hey, this isn't an ad, though, for
no.
Games Workshop, is it?
Well, no, but that's what he says here on this Facebook post, so I'm just repeating what he's saying.
Oh, okay.
But did you know, Alex, that if you're an international backer, you can still late pledge and take advantage of Game Topper's special Kickstarter prices and on all their unlocked stretch goals for Game Toppers, game mats, and all of the sweet Game Toppers accessories.
What a deal. What an amazing deal, especially if you're international, and that stuff usually costs a ton of money if you pledge at the wrong time.
Sure does. So you can check them out again at booth 6D102, but you can also see some of the Game Toppers at the CMON booth, at the AEG booth, Portal Publishing, Breaking Games, Mythic Games, Bombix, Scyther Gaming, all over the place because Berkey and his Game Toppers are a virus that just spreads out and infects an entire con. But it's a good virus because it's really, really sweet Game Toppers that improve your play experience.
Yes, indeed. Game Toppers LLC. In fact, that's their slogan. Game Toppers LLC, upgrading your gaming experience. Hey, Sean. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can lay down a foundation pretty quickly. In a day? You think in a day? You can lay down a foundation in a day?
I think less than a day. I don't think it's going to be that long of a game, Alex. I think it's a game length you'd at least play.
Oh, that's good, because I'm pretty limited in that scope. Yeah, Foundations of Rome, coming soon from Arcane Wonders on Kickstarter. And Sean, you have seen this one before, and you've been excited by this one before.
Yes, Alex. This has some incredibly crafted, beautiful architectural miniatures, different distinct architectural styles for the different players. It creates this fantastic looking cityscape that really has to be seen to believe. The city building board game Foundations of Rome puts you into the role of an architect competing to own land and build magnificent structures. Build damus and insulae, fountains, wineries, and stables, then increase your renown by constructing majestic monuments such as a temple to Jupiter or the Colosseum itself. With over 100 wonderfully detailed miniatures, Foundations of Rome is a testament to the glory of Rome that you can bring to your table.
That looks pretty cool, and it's done by a pretty awesome designer in Emerson Matsuuchi, who has done a number of other Duchy favorites. So, yeah, if you're curious about this game, go to foundationsofrome.com, click on the sign-up link to sign up and get notified when it goes live on Kickstarter. Arcane Wonders, it's never a blunder when you go with Arcane Wonders. Frankenstein, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, and a werewolf, and many more. It's a whole cast of characters ready to spook, scare, and ruin your day. What do we think about Horrified, a very Halloween-y themed game? We'll tell you.
So Horrified is a new game from Ravensburger designed by Prospero Hall, and this is a cooperative game where you are taking on the role of heroes battling the evil Universal movie monsters like the ones you mentioned. Because that's the thing. And what's interesting to me, Alex, is that Universal tried to make like an extended monster universe recently with like the Mummy and there was like that Dracula movie and it just failed spectacularly. But they were like one of the first extended universes back in the 30s and 40s, which is kind of interesting. So like I said, this is a cooperative game, and you're going to be taking turns as the heroes, having a variable number of actions, three to four. You're moving around this map, and with this map that's this little, I guess, I don't know, is it like an Eastern European hamlet?
Yeah, it's like a town, but it could also be generic American because you also you have the camp, and I don't know.
Well, who knows? So basically you are trying to go around, collect certain items to fulfill certain objectives, which operate differently for the different monsters. And meanwhile, there are these villagers that are popping up from time to time who are trying to get from one spot in the town to another spot in the town. And then there are these movie monsters that are walking around trying to kill the villagers, trying to kill you, the player. And so you got to kind of watch out for them. This is very, rules-wise, this is very pandemic-like. This is very Forbidden Desert-like. But with some differences. I don't know. Is there more I really need to go into rules-wise?
Combat, maybe?
Sure. So, all right. You take a turn, Alex. You take a turn, you move around, you go from one spot to another, you pick up certain items. You maybe usher some villagers along, and then at the end of each player turn, then the monsters will activate. You flip over a card from the monster deck, which is going to tell you to do some sort of event. It might be populate the board with a villager, or it might be, I don't know, there's a bunch of different events that happen. And then certain monsters are going to activate. It's going to give you symbols for the monsters. Sometimes those symbols will be for monsters that aren't in that particular game, so you ignore it. Other times it is for that monster. It's going to tell you how far those monsters move. It's going to tell you how many dice they're going to roll for their attack. And then you roll those dice if they wind up in a spot with a villager or with a hero. And if there's attacks that hit, You can defend yourself by discarding items from the items that your hero has collected. Otherwise, you die. Go to the hospital for the next round, and then the terror track moves up because there's a terror track. Basically, if you die too many times, you're going to lose the game. The dice roll might also trigger the special abilities of the monsters. There's also a monster that is considered to be frenzied, which means it may trigger more often. You do that. And so, like, for example, with Dracula, what you're basically trying to do is collect a bunch of red items and then turn them into these coffin locations. And once you've destroyed 4 coffins, then you can go attack Dracula with a certain number of yellow items. And then you've defeated Dracula. So if you do that and you do that for the other monster, boom, bam, you win the game. Hey, that's Horrified. Does that satisfy you, Alex? Are you satisfied now?
I'll be satisfied in a second after this wonderful story that's about to come.
All right, so that's how you play Horrified. Alex, in non-typical Sean fashion, I only got atypical Sean fashion. I only got one play of this wonderful cooperative family weight game in.
What a slacker.
Well, you know what? Not quite my fault. If you recall from a couple episodes ago, Rory caused... What game was it that we were reviewing?
Oh, that came really... That showed up super late and you got just one play
it was
of it.
Century A New World. No, Century
Yes.
A New World? Yeah.
Yep.
Where he was like, yeah, we totally have it. And then we didn't. And I had to go to great lengths to find a copy. I went to all the stores in town, or I called them all at least, and eventually had to order it. So Rory strikes again, Alex.
Uh-oh.
So I got in my first play last week, Duke's Dice Wednesday night, and I'm like, all right, cool. I played the game. I'll get in a couple more plays the next Wednesday. And so I show up for Duke's Dice Wednesday night. The regulars, we've talked about, hey, I got to get some plays into Horrified in tonight. Everyone's fully aware. Great. I show up to Empire, and Eugene says, hey, Horrified isn't here. Rory took it home. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of a problem, but he's bringing it back, right? And Eugene's like, I don't know. So Eugene talks to Rory. Rory's like, oh yeah, it's at the house. I'll bring it. Rory's doing a Costco run to get supplies for the shop. So he comes back and drops the stuff off. I'm like, hey, Rory, gotta have Horrified. Gotta bring it. And he's like, yeah, I'll totally run to the house, bring it back. And I'm like, well, what'd you even take it for? Because he's been going off for the last week. Oh, this is a great Halloween game. It's Halloween season. Tons of people want to play this light family weight game, but it's gone from the shop, right? So I'm like, okay, Rory, so you're going to go home and you're going to bring it back, right? He lives 8 minutes away from the shop, literally 8 minutes away. And he leaves. Oh, actually, first he goes back to have a meeting, which I didn't realize he was going to do. Hour goes by. He hasn't left. Finally, he leaves. Okay, I'm going to go run to the house and bring it back. No Rory. Rory doesn't show up. Doesn't answer phone calls. I have no Horrified to play, Alex.
That is a terrifying story.
It's a horrifying story.
Yes.
So let me say this. I can put an asterisk on the review because I like to have more than one play typically. However, compare this to what we talked about last episode, Tapestry. Tapestry was a game where I had to play, was it 5 or 6 times to really figure out what I thought about the game. And even after my 5 or 6 plays, I still wasn't quite sure. This was a game where after my first play, I'm like, okay, I think I know what I need to know about this game. Multiple plays would have been good so I could see the different monsters, so I can see the variability there, because you can mix and match the monsters. You can have in the very first intro game, it's Dracula and the Creature of the Black Lagoon. You can mix them up. You can add more monsters. You can do all sorts of things. So really, it would have helped with the variability. But if I'm being 100% honest, this was a game where after one play, I pretty much knew my thoughts on it. And I realized I'm probably reviewing this with the idea of, okay, this is not a Sean game. In what situation is this game going to be good for others? So that's what it is, Alex. Rory strikes again. Rory is the true movie monster of this review.
What would his abilities be in this game?
He swipes things from the board and puts them in hiding, and you have to find them. Oh, but he promises to bring them back and then doesn't.
Oh man, rough, brutal.
Yeah. It's not good times.
Well, other than that, what was your initial impression of this game?
My initial impression was that this is a worse Pandemic, a worse Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert. And if you really like the 1930s/40s IP, then this game's for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that fits.
So again, I would say this is a ducal fine. I think it's good for Halloween. I think it's a good family weight game. But if I wanted to play a horror co-op game, I would totally rather play Pandemic Cthulhu.
Yeah, okay. So my first impressions of this kind of came from when I heard about this at Gen Con, because this was one of the hot games coming out of Gen Con that wasn't really on the radar before Gen Con. And when I heard it was a hot game and I saw what it was, my reaction was, really?
Yeah.
Huh. And it's in this interesting space where it's a mass markety kind of game, but that's trying to be a hobby game at the same time, and it's kind of hard to tell which of those camps it really fits into. And so I wasn't sure going in if the gameplay of this would live up to the hype I'd heard coming out of Gen Con. So
yeah.
I was confused, I think was my initial impression coming in, more just on how much attention it was getting. Rulebook, Sean, did you learn this one from the rulebook?
I did not. So every Wednesday night they do a demo game for the staff, and this happened to be the demo game last week, which also is interesting because they do these demo games so that the staff can teach the game to new players to customers. And it's not in the shop. By the way, I should also mention that last week, before I confirmed that Empire had a copy, I reached out to our buddy Jared because I knew he had a copy and he had painted the miniatures. And I said, hey, Jared, would I be able to borrow your copy of Horrified? And he didn't get back to me for a couple days because he was incommunicado, no big deal. And he messaged me over the weekend and he was like, hey, do you still need my copy of Horrified? And I'm like, oh, no, don't worry about it. The shop has a copy. I'm good.
Good old Sean just throwing away backup plans. Man.
To be fair, should I have expected that was the one game that Rory was going to take? Like, he doesn't play games outside of the shop.
I don't know.
Anyway. He does. Anyway. So no, but I have referenced the rule book. I have taken a look at it. I'm actually just kind of scrolling through it here on the PDF of it on the computer. And yeah, it's a fine rule book. It's actually, it's kind of funny because you look at this compared to Tapestry. It's a long rule book, and it's a
in comparison, sure,
yeah. Just walls of text. So yeah, but it's the gameplay's kind of rote. Like you just go through the steps. Doesn't seem to be a lot of corner cases, and yeah, I think it's a fine rule book.
Yeah, and the rulebook does well enough. When I've had to look things up, which happened a couple of times, it wasn't too hard to piece through. There are things done in support of the rules. For instance, it has setup instructions for all of the monsters on the back of one of the monster sheets. So it will tell you the exact steps you need to take to set up each specific monster. There's a lot of places where the rules are reinforced, and that's always a positive thing. And we'll talk about that more in iconography and components, art and components. But it's something that was done well. The game is easy enough to teach. It's easy enough to digest. I certainly didn't run into a ton of rules issues, other than the occasional, oh, that does actually work like that kind of question that would come up from time to time. But no, I didn't have any significant rules baggage with this one, so to speak.
So I think the big surprise here is the art and components, especially for a Ravensburger game. So
hit me with it.
Well, no, I mean, I think the art and components are good. I mean, and you look at, say, Las Vegas. You look at Castles of Burgundy. Ravensburger has never really been known for high production value and like fantastic art. And I think for both of those, I think this is pretty good. Now, granted, there are miniatures just for the monsters. There are standees for the villagers and for the heroes, which to me isn't a huge deal. I don't mind that. But overall, I mean, I think the table presence is pretty solid, and the component quality is also really solid. Again, kind of surprising for a Ravensburger art and production.
I think this is sort of true, and there are certainly some very nice elements to it. The miniatures are nice. The board looks good. The standees I don't mind at all, and I think they actually look fine. I like the uniquely shaped the heroes that you have. Those have cool shapes to them. There are little extra components like the dials for Frankenstein and the Bride, the little scarabs for the Mummy. Those things are all done really well. But man, were those cards the cheapest things I've ever held in my hand.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
They were the cheapest. That's the cheapest bit of cardstock I think I've ever played a game with. They are so paper thin. And it bugged me because there aren't that many of them. There aren't that many cards in this game. I think I'm completely guessing. I don't have it in my hand, but there's something like 28 of those monster deck cards, and then another maybe 15, 20 of the perk cards.
Yeah, it's 13 monster, or sorry, not 13. Wow.
No.
30 monster cards,
okay,
and 20 perk cards.
Yeah, okay, not too far off. So it's a decently small deck of cards, and those things are really thin. The only other, the main other complaint that I will say is there are things that are just way too small. So for instance, the text on top of the standees for some of the villagers.
Yeah, that's true.
As well as identifying who the villagers are. That wasn't really well set up to find out who that villager is and where they're going, which is it's vital information gameplay-wise, because obviously you get those villagers where they're looking to go. You get those extra perks, which are huge in the game. They can really swing a game. So that was frustrating to see. There were just moments where that text was just not functional. On the other hand, there were some really cool things. I think the monster cards were well formatted. They got a lot of information on those cards and did it in an organized, nice way, including how those monsters work, right? In what order do they attack? How do they attack? How are they moving? How many dice of damage are they rolling at you? All of that stuff was nice and clean and laid out and easy to decipher what a monster needs. I thought they did a nice job on that, and there were just a couple instances where the text was a little too small, and again, the cards, that was just so... it was such a bummer. Anyway, so yeah, not all in all, a pretty good showing. And yeah, I think it's more a strength than a weakness for the game, for sure.
So, all right, Alex, let me ask you about your gameplay experience. How many players did you play this at?
I played this consistently at 4 players. I actually didn't play at any other player count but 4 players.
And what was the hardest level you played at?
So it's the base level, but the hardest game that I had of this was when we played with Frankenstein and the Bride and the Mummy. Frankenstein and the Bride proved pretty difficult because they have 2 monster figures roaming around the board instead of just one. So that's pretty tricky. I didn't play with 3 monsters, which is kind of the next level of difficulty. But all 3 games I played ultimately resulted in wins. We did have a 4th game that would have certainly been a loss if we'd kept going, just because of the start that we got. And I'll talk a little bit about that one because there's a quirk that comes up with this game that I think is important to discuss. But yeah, to answer your question, the hardest difficulty was technically speaking the lowest because it was just with the 2 monsters. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, so we played 4 players. Yeah, we played 4 players, and we just played the intro game, which had the creature from the Black Lagoon and Dracula.
Yeah,
and we lost. Yeah, we lost. We're terrible. We're bad gamers, Alex. So we lost.
How did you lose?
We killed Dracula.
Oh, okay.
And then we had a series of very unlucky dice rolls for the creature from the Black Lagoon. So with the creature from the Black Lagoon, the object is to find his lair, and then you have to drive him away. So there's this, each of the monsters have their own little monster board, which tracks how you defeat them differently. And with the creature, you're trying to move this boat through the lagoon and get to a certain point, and you're doing this by picking up different colored items and then discarding them at the camp location. And anytime there's a special action by the creature, it moves your boat back. So we rolled this 3 dice attack from the creature, and fortunately didn't kill anyone, but it was 3 special actions which moved the boat back, and then a couple other bad rolls like that. And we eventually ran out of terror. We died too many times, because before we killed Dracula, he was just beating up fools left and right.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Matthew. Matthew died 1 billion times. Like, Matthew just had the worst luck in attracting Dracula. We were like joking that he was Mina, because Dracula would just make a beeline for him every single time. Didn't matter what happened. Dracula was just all over Matthew.
I think that term, the worst luck, I think is actually pretty fitting for some elements of this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel with a lot of these co-op games. After I had played this, I played 3 or 4 games of Pandemic on my iPad. And much better game. And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. You know, sometimes in Pandemic, you're trying to collect like color cards and with one person. And sometimes the deck just gives you, one of each, spread them out, and makes it too difficult. So I agree with you. But to me, that's kind of par for the course with this style of game.
Well, but it felt more extreme in some instances, because the deck will do things like, hey, spawn this villager at this location. Okay, now these 2 monsters are both going to attack. Oops, that villager that just spawned is now eaten immediately by the monster. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And that was the case at, early turns of the games. There would be nothing you could do. I haven't even taken my turn yet, and I've already died. That's not necessarily a great feeling in this game.
Sure.
When you literally cannot, it's not like in Pandemic where it's like, well, okay, maybe if we'd done this to mitigate that city, or done this to move these cards around, and maybe we got a little unlucky. It's a different feeling when it's literally, I could do nothing. There's nothing I could have done about this situation.
Yeah, I think the equivalent, but I think you're right. I think the equivalent in Pandemic is when there's an epidemic and you are drawing a brand new card that outbreaks, and then you shuffle everything together, and then it's a 1 in X chance of redrawing that same card. Doesn't happen often, but certainly can, and there's an immediate outbreak that you can't really do anything about unless you happen to have a card that might stop it. I don't know. But I agree with you, because, I think that happened to Matthew. I think he got killed by Dracula before his first turn even. And that's a little frustrating.
And that kind of thing didn't just happen once in these plays. It happened in a couple of the plays. And it happened in one case so severely that we just restarted. We're like, we haven't done anything, and we're already about halfway through in terms of the Horrified track. So there's no way. And it's an interesting thing, because that kind of unearned moment is not a feel good moment in that context to me.
Right.
That early in a game, because even with Pandemic, I don't think you'll see that happen that early in a game typically.
Right. No, you won't.
So at least you've made some decisions by the time, it might have still been unavoidable, but at least you've made some sort of a decision. Gameplay strategy wise, did you find any of the strategy compelling or interesting as you were playing? Were you kind of talking that out and figuring out things to do?
Yeah, I mean, it was similar to other games of this style, trying to figure out what's most efficient. You're trying to prioritize goals, planning for long-term strategy, but tactically reacting to the changing board state. Like I said, it's fine. And I think this becomes a question of, and we'll talk about this later, becomes a question of, all right, if you like this style of gameplay, if you like this weight, where does this particular flavor of it fit in for most people? So yeah, I don't know that I would certainly say that almost every version of Pandemic I've played is better than this. And certainly this is not Pandemic, but man, is it close enough.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's probably closest to the Cthulhu Pandemic.
It is certainly closer to Cthulhu than it is to vanilla Pandemic, not just thematically, but gameplay wise. I agree with that.
Right, because you have the Shoggoths, roaming around the board. And,
right.
So yeah, I'm just a grumpy old gamer.
Where I will say the strength of this game is the variability that those monsters provide. Because I know due to circumstances, we'll call it an act of Rory. Due to an act of Rory, that you were only able to get a play of this in time. The variability there can be really interesting. Frankenstein and the Bride make for a pretty compelling opponent. Their special power is if they ever come in contact with each other, you advance the Horrified marker and then they kind of go back to their separate sides of the board. They can move individually. They can attack individually. If the exclamation mark comes up, the Bride moves one space closer to Frankenstein. You're trying to feed them items to restore their humanity and then get them to meet with their humanity restored. And that's how you ultimately win. The Mummy's an interesting one. The Mummy is basically a slide puzzle where you go to the museum and you pay an item, and the strength of that item determines how many moves in the slide puzzle you get. That was a pretty cool one. So they're cool little tweaks and twists. The werewolf is brutal. The werewolf can attack everyone in a space instead of a situation where you can frequently gameplay strategy wise, you can set up a situation where one player is the tank. One player has just a boatload of items and they're just going to sit there and while everyone else is running around the board doing something, they're going to sit there and take hits and absorb damage from the monsters until they either die or someone else swaps in and becomes the tank. There's sort of a I tank, you go kind of a thing. If this game ended, by the way, it came close to us losing a few times. It wasn't going to come close to us losing from the running out of time card condition. The game does pressure you into making moves because it'll have you burn through items. It'll have you burn through villagers. Yeah. The one thing I will say is in all of my games, and it was interesting to hear you say you had a different experience, once one monster was defeated, the others were no problem at all. There was just nothing to it. The game might as well have been over when one of the monsters was done. So I don't know. I also found the movement system compelling. I thought that was really smartly done, how they have the different events for different monsters, the random spawns, the items coming out at different places. It is a more thematic and more random pandemic in that way. And I think that can be compelling for a certain group of players, especially, again, the variability that having those monsters to go up against and the different mix and match and the different puzzles and how they operate, how that comes into play, especially as you know the deck more. There is more depth here than meets the eye, more depth than I would have expected from a game like this. But there are definitely some missteps. There's definitely those feel bad moments of, I didn't do anything and we moved up on the Horrified track and there's absolutely nothing that could have happened. It has some early game problems from that standpoint in my mind that do sour the experience and soured it pretty significantly. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's too much else to say about gameplay, Sean. Do you think this one would be better with a smaller player count?
No, not necessarily. I mean, that's what I try and do is I try to get a different play counts, but I think it's fine. I mean, there are rules for solo play, and yeah, I don't know. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk theme.
Okay. Hey, this game has a ton of theme.
Yeah, it does have a ton of theme.
A ton of theme. An absolute megaton of theme.
Yeah, the monsters all have well-realized themes.
Yeah.
And so that was very well done.
What's interesting, there is one of the villagers, or I guess it's a pair of villagers, is Abbott and Costello. I forget the names of their characters in the movie, or in the movies. And it's just kind of funny to think of them like running around the town, having watched a ton of Abbott and Costello movies as a kid, and having watched a ton of these Universal horror movies as a kid. So yeah, this is, as I feel like as someone who has enjoyed those old movies, this certainly hit thematically. But at the same time, I don't know that I'm, in retrospect, that crazy about this particular IP.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who would be either.
There were other little moments of, for instance, there was one of the heroes you can roam around with looks like a paper boy. I can't remember the name of him. And there's sort of the moments of, oh, hey, I'm teleporting and I'm tagging along. And I ended up calling there's one character that can basically warp anywhere they want on the board, but they have fewer actions. Dr. Manhattan, for some reason. They just kind of seem like this all-powerful deity, just like, whoop, I'm gone, I grab this stuff, whoop, I'm back. And there's also kind of funky moments where you're like, oh, I fought off Dracula with this microscope, I guess, because that's the item I used to defend against the damage that was sent my way.
It's a blunt object. You can do some
but
damage.
There were some things that also weren't blunt objects that, anyway. There's a ton of theme and some small disconnects, and it did help lend to the fun of the game. I think the theme certainly worked well, and the fact that those monsters all operate in such different ways is a nice touch. So, yeah, I thought successful on theme as a whole. Before we jump to final thoughts, though, Sean, we do have 2 guild thoughts on this game. That's right, guild thoughts on our review game. BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, Horrified was a pleasant surprise. Remember that phrase, pleasant surprise. Horrified was a pleasant surprise for us. Played 2 games of it back-to-back recently, mainly to see all the monsters, and enjoyed how accessible yet tense the game was. We lost the first game and won the second, and I could see playing this with experienced gamers and newcomers alike.
And then Chris K says, I'm not a co-op lover, but I was pleasantly surprised, there it is again, by Horrified. While it's simple, it has a decent amount of variability and enough fun quirks to make me want to play again. Components and art are an A+ too. I think this would be a great buy for those who are just getting into gaming or who like lighter co-ops. My critique after one play is that it is quite difficult to come by those perk cards. I wish there was a way to get those more easily. And I should mention, I don't think we talked about it, but basically you start the game with a perk card, and then whenever a villager gets to its destination, the person who achieved that gets one of the perk cards.
Right. So, but those perk cards, it doesn't really matter who has them. They're sort of like I think they're event cards in Pandemic where you can use them not as an action during any player phase, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very Pandemic-esque, but yeah.
So Alex, were you pleasantly surprised by Horrified?
I was slightly surprised. I think it's a better. If you had told me it's a Pandemic-esque game based off of the Universal Movie Monsters IP, I would have thought there was absolutely zero chance that would be compelling or interesting. And I think the variability of the monsters, there is a compelling or interesting thing to it. So I was surprised by that. And there were certainly, I agree with BJ, there were definitely tense moments in this game. And there were fun moments in this game. So I was surprised. It was certainly better than my expectations were or would have been. But I don't know if it was better enough than my expectations, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So yeah, final thoughts and rating. I'll go first on this, Sean, because I always make you go first on this. And I'm just going to go first. Yeah, as talked about, this game has moments of fun. It has a well-integrated theme. It has, for the most part, really nice components with some drawbacks. The variability's there with the monsters. They operate in interesting, fun, thematic ways. I definitely did voices when I was playing this game. And I had fun. I certainly had fun, but there were frustrating moments where the game felt like it was taking away interesting decisions from you. Yeah, there's a lot of smart things in the design here, and as a whole, it just doesn't come fully together enough for me to really go as high as a 4 on this one. For folks who don't know, we rate games on a 6-point scale here at the Dukes of Dice. 1 being bad, bad, very bad. 6 being very, very, very good. This one is going to settle in at a 3. Game's okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. I will say this, I think there's a better chance I will have played this come next year than a lot of 3s. If only because this makes sense as an introductory kind of a co-op-y game. It has a theme that I think newer players can connect to, and it's easy enough to teach that I think there's some value there. I wanted to play this before this review with Abby, but that That did not end up ultimately happening. So,
man, what a slacker, Alex.
Shut up. I think I'll play this. I think there's a chance I'll have played this by the time we do the double take next year. But it's certainly not a slam dunk, and I'm just not excited enough about this to say, yeah, I want access to this. Yeah, I need this in my collection. I think there are other games that do what it's doing a little better, even if it has some unique twists to it. So, yeah, I'm going to settle in under 3 with this one.
So this turned out to be exactly what I suspected it would be. I mean, really, there was nothing that I found super surprising about this game. It met my expectations spot on, and like you said, so not having played multiple plays of this, I did suspect that the variability was interesting, or that it could be interesting. And I read through all the different monsters, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see where that would have significant appeal in trying to play through these different monsters. But ultimately, I was like, yeah, this is just going to be a lighter pandemic that does, it's it's a well-tread path, and it's not going to be as good, but it's fine. So what are my final thoughts? Well, so even though it's the Halloween episode, which, by the way, this is our first ever Halloween episode.
Spooktacular.
Yeah. Even though it's the Halloween episode, I'm not going to unleash the 2. A 2 is a game has some merit, but it has significant issues. And then there's sort of an underlying, it's not part of the official descriptor, but I don't really want to play this game again. Like, I would refuse to play this game again. I'm not quite there. It's not that I would refuse to play this game again, but man, I don't care if I ever play this game again. Now, this game is not for me. That's not to say that there aren't light games I like. I feel like I have to say this every time. Someone's like, well, you don't like light games. Like, no. There are certain light games I like quite a bit. So I would play almost any other pandemic before I played this, and they're about an equivalent weight. I would play Forbidden Desert before I play this. No, Forbidden Desert's not going to be my first choice. But anyway, and that's what I was kind of alluding to throughout is, if this were somehow a Marvel theme, I might like it more. If this were, I just don't understand, unless you're just trying to make a Halloween game, I just don't understand the appeal of the classic Universal movie monsters. And again, that's someone who has seen all of the really bad ones, who's seen the Abbott and Costello meet Wolfman, who's seen, it's just not an IP that I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's great. It just seems dated, and it just seems, it's like, who is this for, I guess. And if I'm going to want to play something like this and aim for a game that's lightweight, family weight, that I can use as an intro game for someone, for a new gamer. We've had a ton of new gamers come out to Duke's Dice Wednesday night the last couple weeks. This would not be the one I go to for that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's a better game than I'm giving it credit for, but I just don't know what place it has in terms of usage for me. So it's a 3. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation, but boy, is it bordering on that 2. The 2 is just the chains are shaking. You can kind of see the bolts starting to kind of come out of the wall.
It's alive.
But I won't unleash the 2.
All right.
And by the way, Dr. 2 is the name of the scientist that created the 2. So it's unfair to, never mind.
Well, that's a look at Horrified. A not horrific, but also not unhorrific score from both of us. A 3 from me, and a 3, but maybe morphing from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde 2 for Sean.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, next up on our Duke's Double Take, we're looking back at episode 186, Polterdice, where we reviewed Coimbra. And this is one that we both really, really dug. I gave this one a 5. I said I love all of the things going on in that one main decision in that game, that one drafting decision you make, where you're picking the color of dice, the number of dice, where it goes. I loved all of that. And I declared during that episode that on the double take, I didn't think it would slip. You gave this one a 5. You said you were eager to play more, and it restored your faith in humanity a bit, and that you picked up a copy, which was unusual for you felt, and kind of signified the level of quality you thought the game had. Sean, have you played this game since?
So I played it one time shortly after the review. And when I say that it restored my faith in humanity, I'm assuming that was fairly tongue-in-cheek, because I had been on a streak of just hammering midweight Euros.
Yep.
The featured reviews that we had in the month or two leading up to this was just one midweight Euro that I just was not crazy about after another. And this one I really enjoyed. So much so that I was trying to make it happen, make another play of this happen in the last week or two in advance of the double take, because I did remember this fondly. Raquel liked it quite a bit. There is a type of midweight Euro that's maybe a little bit on the heavier side that I find really interesting, and really the best example of that are the capstone games and the what's your game games. There's a certain feel to them, there's a certain complexity to them, and this, while it's not either of those, capstone or what's your game, it had that certain feel to it. You know, the recent one would have been what's the one? Oh shoot, what's the one we just did? Gugong. Gugong felt that way to me. So this was a midweight Euro that, man, I was okay with, because it's got really interesting dice drafting, and sometimes you want them high and sometimes you want them low because it'll affect priority, but it also affects price, and just a lot of really interesting decisions to me. There's the board that the paths that you're running around on. I really enjoyed this game. I regret not playing it more recently, but I did play it shortly after the review, and I'm gonna make a pledge to play this again fairly shortly.
All right.
So it's gonna stay at a 5.
I did play this again, and also really enjoyed it again.
Cool.
So yeah, it has not changed one bit in my mind. I have played it again. I have enjoyed it again, and it's not going to slip. It's still a 5. That being said, we got an absolute flood of guild response on this one, and a ton. So much so that I did not put all of them in there, but I put a lot of them in there. And I will say, this was a reasonably divisive game on the guild. There were definitely people on both sides of the coin with this game. Starting off with Ben Coberly, he says, I picked up Coimbra in a trade earlier this year. I was excited to get it because people seemed to love it. I played it 3 times and then promptly got rid of it. It wasn't really all that interesting. The path to victory seemed to be moving your guy around the map, and if you had less than 4 players, the mechanism to simulate the extra player was annoying and always took the cards that you wanted. The other people I played with felt about the same way, or else I would have just given it to someone in my game group. That's Ben Coberly on that one.
And then Sylvain Lacroix says, it's not a bad game, but it's a forgettable one. The concept is well thought, the decisions are okay, but I think it just falls in the middle. Nowadays, being a good game is not enough. We need great games. It's a ducal 3 for me, and a low 3.
Whoa. I definitely agree with that sentiment that good is not good enough anymore, especially given how flooded and crowded. I mean, you look at the games list for Essen, and it's pretty clear. Good is definitely not good enough. Great has to be the metric. I just happen to think this one does fit the bill.
Right.
On the more positive side, BJ from Word Game Gumbo says, this was my game of the year for 2018, but sadly, I've only played it twice since BGG-Con. I still have the envie to play it, so I'm not ready for it to leave my collection. It's an easy 5 on the ducal scale. I was not a fan of the little box expansion. Adds more dice, but not much else. But I bet Coimbra would go to a 6 if they ever issued an expansion that had a replacement set of cards. So he's pretty high on that one.
And following that sentiment, Ben Ogden says, Coimbra is a fantastic game. The depth of decisions paired with a large amount of replayability / variety make it one of my wife's and my favorite Euros of the last few years. Even scaled down to 2 players, the decisions, tension, and fun are still there. A ducal 5 for me.
Very nice. All right, next up, Francois Mali. I am probably butchering that. I'm sorry, Francois. The draft mechanism is full of agonizing choices between the number and the color of a die. You want the right track to fire, but with the right number, and the cards can make a nice engine building by the end of the game. The turns are normally fast, but with the wrong group, it can be an AP nightmare. The track mechanism is engaging, albeit not innovative. Biggest downside, there's too much scoring in the end game. Each track scores, each voyage scores, each end game card scores, and it's not finished. The ribbon, and then the resources, and then the crown. It just makes a very long end game, which takes a great game to a pretty good one for me. Duke will score a high 4.
And the last one we've got here is Christopher John, who says, we say this all the time, but if Coimbra had come out just a few years earlier, I am totally convinced that it would have been an evergreen game for Eggertspiel. It is an incredible game with a high rating on BGG, universal acclaim from the top content creators in the industry, excellent production, and engrossing gameplay. But in an age where games are being churned out quicker than Oreo overload at a Cold Stone, ooh, that sounds good, it just couldn't cut through all the static. I love this game, but I've only played it 3 to 4 times in the past year. My gaming group is constantly playing the Tapestries and the Vindications of the moment, and I fear that it will sit on my shelf as yet another game that I deeply enjoy, but will never get the time it truly deserves. An easy high 5 on the ducal scale for me. And I think in our review of Gugong, what I said towards the end were, I think that there are certain midweight Euros that some people are just going to love and some people aren't. And so there's plenty of people here that Coimbra was just meh for. And for like you and me and the Ben Ogdens and the BJs who really enjoyed it. But that may get all shuffled up with a different midweight Euro,
Yeah, that's true. You don't know which one's going to be that one with universal appeal, which one's going to be the one with staying power, right? Sometimes you play a game and it's in an instant like, oh yeah, that's amazing. And then sometimes you see a game being played a few years later and you're like, I can't believe people are still playing that. So taste is everything. And obviously if the industry could predict exactly what was going to become a runaway success and what was just going to be kind of one of those that sits on the shelf and is really good but just underappreciated, they would certainly make more of the evergreen ones. But there's only so many games, and there can only be so many quote-unquote evergreens. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll be curious to see if this one's still being played, 5 years or so from now. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure, Sean. So, yeah, that's our look at Coimbra. Stays pretty steady. 5 for you, stayed there. 5 for me, stayed there as well. Last thing before we wrap up, we have the rest of the best, or best of the rest. I don't know, one of those things. The best of the rest names for the episode that we didn't use. First up, from Jimmy DM90, Portugools. I think this one for me was the runner-up. Portugools, referencing Portugal, Coimbra, and of course Ghouls for Horrified.
And then BJ from Board Game Gumbo suggested Grave Decisions. Of course, Grave in terms of the severity, but also where dead bodies rest. And zombies come. And Draculas.
Yep.
Oh no, Draculas!
Oh no, not Draculas. All right, next up from Ben Ogden, Nosferatu. Again, referencing Portugal and referencing Nosferatu. It's kind of the inverse one of Jimmy DM90's name, but also pretty good.
And then Baker Mitchell suggested the Dicey Horror Podcast Show. So I'm thinking that's a Rocky Horror reference.
Yep, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then referencing the dice that are so core in Coimbra.
Right.
And then finally, Severin Heiberg with Werewolves of Portugal.
Do.
Did I butcher that one again? Or did I do better that time?
That was good.
Okay, all right. We had. I remember the last time we had any sort of a Werewolves of London themed kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I forget what it was, but it was terrible. Like you had, what was it? You had the melody all wrong? Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it was fine.
It was fine. It was a ducal. It was fine.
Look, I always appreciate a good singing moment. So anyone who can provide one of those for me, I'm not gonna be too upset about that. So, but yeah, that'll just about do it, Sean.
Okay. Well, yeah, like you said, that will do it, Alex, for episode 211, Universal Acclaim. Thanks again to Don Gilstrap for helping us name the episode. Until next time, this is Sean.
and also Alex.
And boo you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on October 17th, 2019. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com, and for all the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Arcane Wonders and Game Toppers LLC. You can learn more about Arcane Wonders' fine titles at arcanewonders.com and find out more about Game Toppers at gametoppersllc.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on.